Two little sisters from a small harbor town in Massachusetts vanished in 1985 while playing outside with their red radio flyer wagon. Police searched for months, but the girls seemed to have disappeared into thin air on that warm summer day. 15 years later, a fisherman pulled something shocking from the depths of the ocean, a haunting clue that would finally break open the cold case and shatter a mother's world. The morning sun cast long shadows across the weathered floorboards of Moren Mercer's kitchen in Rockport, Massachusetts. The small coastal town had been her home for over 30 years, and while its bustling harbors and tight-knit community once brought her comfort, now they felt like a prison of memories. At 46, Moren stood at the sink, mechanically washing the same coffee cup for the third time, her mind a million miles away, as it so often was. A knock at the door startled her from her daze. Through the window, she saw a police cruiser parked outside, and a cold dread immediately washed over her. Her hands trembled as she dried them and made her way to the door. Two officers stood on her porch, their expressions serious but not unkind. The taller one, Officer Brennan, looked familiar. "Mrs. Mercer," he began, removing his cap, "we need you to come with us to Granite Cove Harbor. There's been a development in your daughter's case." Moren's heart lurched. "What kind of development?" "A fisherman pulled something from the water this morning," the second officer explained. "We believe it's connected to Laya and Daisy." The names of her twins still pierced her heart like shards of glass. Without a word, Moren grabbed her jacket, not bothering to change out of her house dress and cardigan. Her legs felt unsteady as she followed the officers to their patrol car. The 10-minute drive to Granite Cove Harbor felt both endless and too brief. She pressed her face against the cool window, watching familiar streets blur past. When they arrived, the harbor was already bustling with activity. Several police vehicles were parked near the docks, and forensics personnel moved with purpose. Detective James Morrison stood near the water's edge, his graying hair ruffled by the salty breeze. He had handled the case from the beginning, and in those dark early days, he had almost become a friend. Beside him stood a weathered fisherman in rubber boots and a thick sweater. And on a blue tarp between them sat something that made Moren's breath catch in her throat. The red radio flyer wagon. Even corroded by 15 years in the ocean, barnacle-encrusted and missing a wheel, she knew it instantly. Her legs nearly gave out as she approached. "Mrs. Mercer," Detective Morrison said gently, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "This is Tommy Caldwell. He's the one who found it." Tommy Caldwell looked to be in his 50s, with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to being the center of attention. "Ma'am," Tommy began, his thick Massachusetts accent familiar and comforting. "I was trying out some deeper waters this morning. Fish have been scarce lately. When I pulled up my nets out near Devil's Drop, there was a whole lot of trash tangled up in them. And then I saw this." He gestured to the wagon. "I remembered them flyers from when your girls went missing. That wagon was in all the pictures. Soon as I saw it, I called the police." Moren finally found her voice. "Devil's Drop? But nobody fishes there. If it's been out there all this time, why hasn't anyone found it before?" Tommy rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, ma'am, Devil's Drop has a reputation. Jagged rocks underneath. Currents that'll turn your boat around before you know it. Most fishermen won't go near it. Call it superstition if you want, but the sea keeps some places for herself." "Did you find anything else?" Moren's voice cracked. "The girls? Their bodies?" Detective Morrison shook his head. "Not yet. We've already sent divers down to search the area thoroughly. If there's anything else down there, we'll find it." Moren crouched beside the wagon, her fingers hovering over its rusty surface. Despite the damage, she could still make out the familiar scratch along one side where Daisy had dragged it against the garage door. And there, barely visible beneath the grime, were traces of purple, the remnants of nail polish Laya had used in her attempt to redecorate the wagon just days before they disappeared. "This is definitely theirs," she whispered to Morrison. "See this scratch? And Laya tried to paint it purple with my nail polish." Morrison nodded, making notes. "Mrs. Mercer, I need you to come to the station. This is no longer just a missing persons case. The wagon being found this far out at sea, someone with a boat was involved. This is now a criminal investigation, possibly abduction." "What about me, Detective?" Tommy Caldwell cleared his throat. "We've recorded your statement, Mr. Caldwell," Morrison said. "Just need you to sign some paperwork and leave your contact information. We'll reach out if we need anything else." As Tommy signed the forms, Moren turned to him. Thank you for not just throwing it back." For remembering. The fisherman's weathered face softened. I got grandkids of my own, ma'am. I'll be at home or at my boathouse today if you need me. As the police car sped toward the station, Moren's mind reeled. For 15 years, she'd lived in a horrible limbo of not knowing. Now, with the discovery of the wagon, that limbo was shifting into something else, something that might finally bring answers, however terrible they might be. At the station, Morrison led her to his office, the same room where she'd spent countless hours in 1985. The walls still bore the same faded paint and a water stain in the corner of the ceiling, but now there was a bulky computer on his desk. "Let's go through this again," Morrison said gently, pulling out the thick, worn case file. 15 years ago, August 12, 1985, your daughters, Laya and Daisy, 8 years old, were playing outside with their radio flyer wagon. Moren nodded, the familiar recitation both painful and necessary. They did it often. The park was just across the road from our house. We didn't have much of a backyard, so I let them play there. It was safe. Rockport was safe. Everyone knew everyone. They were supposed to be home by 5:30 p.m.? Yes, Moren confirmed. When they didn't come home, I went looking. First the park, then the fish market where I had my stall. I asked everyone if they'd seen the girls, but no one had. I checked the stores we visited as a family. Nothing. Morrison flipped through the pages. We interviewed everyone in your neighborhood, checked every gas station, and contacted the harbor authority. No one reported seeing anything suspicious. It didn't make sense, Moren said, her voice tight with the old frustration. Rockport had one of the lowest crime rates in the state. We didn't have human trafficking here. We didn't have those kinds of criminals. And now we find the wagons so far out at sea. Whoever did this had access to a boat, Morrison concluded. That narrows it down considerably. Someone in the fishing or harbor community knows something. He leaned back in his chair. We're going to alert the community again, re-interview everyone, especially those who owned or operated boats in 1985. I want to see Tommy Caldwell again, Moren said suddenly. To thank him properly. Morrison nodded and wrote down Tommy's address on a piece of letterhead. Do you have a cell phone, Mrs. Mercer? A number? Moren asked. I never saw the need. The detective opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small Nokia phone. Take this. It's a spare. I've taped the numbers you'll need on the back. Keep it with you. We're actively working this case now, and I need to be able to reach you when you're not home. Moren took the phone, its weight unfamiliar in her hand. Technology had marched on while she'd stood still, frozen in 1985. After signing some paperwork, Morrison offered to have an officer drive her home. She accepted, suddenly exhausted despite it being barely noon. As the patrol car pulled up to her house, Moren clutched the Nokia phone and the paper with Tommy's address. For 15 years, she'd had nothing but questions and old photographs. Now she had the red wagon and a new thread to follow. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had yesterday. The officer waited until she was safely inside before driving away. Moren stood in her doorway for a moment, looking out at the quiet street where her daughters had once played. She went upstairs to change, then walked out to her car and headed for Tommy's address. Moren's old Honda Civic pulled up to Tommy Caldwell's property, a modest 2-story house with weathered cedar shingles beside a boathouse that had seen better days. She could see Tommy outside, a pressure washer in hand, blasting years of grime from the boathouse's exterior. He noticed her and shut off the machine, raising a hand in greeting as she stepped out of her car. The sudden silence was filled by the cry of gulls and the distant sound of boat engines. Mrs. Mercer, Tommy said, wiping his hands on his already damp jeans. Didn't expect to see you so soon. Please call me Moren, she said, approaching him. I wanted to thank you properly, away from all the police and commotion. Tommy gestured to a pair of old lawn chairs. Can I get you something? Coffee, water? No, thank you. I won't take up much of your time. They sat down, and Moren looked out at the harbor view, partially visible between neighboring buildings. I haven't been around the harbor much these past 15 years, she admitted. After the girls disappeared, I couldn't bear it. Too many memories. Tommy nodded, understanding in his weathered face. Can't imagine how hard that must have been. Tell me, Moren said, shifting in the creaky chair. How has the fishing community changed? In 15 years, things must be different. Oh, plenty's changed, Tommy said, settling back. Lost a lot of the old-timers. The young folks don't want to fish like their fathers did. They go to college, get office jobs in Boston. It's hard work for uncertain pay. And whoever took my girls to that spot, to Devil's Drop, they would have needed a boat. Moren said carefully. Someone from the community. Tommy's expression darkened. Been thinking about that myself. Back in '85, there were maybe 60 or 70 boats working out of Rockport. Now we're down to half that. Whoever did this, they knew these waters. New Devil's Drop was a place nobody'd look. The conversation drifted, and Moren found herself asking, "Did you know my stall at the fish market? Mercer's Fresh Catch." Tommy's face brightened slightly. "Of course I did. You had the spot right at the corner. Best location in the market. What happened to that spot after I closed?" "Well, let me think." Tommy scratched his chin. "For a while it sat empty. The market wasn't the same without your stall there. Then Frank DeWitt took it over. He's done well for himself there." "Frank?" Moren's brow furrowed. "But Frank had his own stall back then. His business was struggling. I once bought his entire stock just to help him out." Tommy chuckled. "That sounds like something you'd do." "He didn't appreciate it," Moren continued. "The second time I tried, he got offended, told me to mind my own stall and stop pitying him. He was always prideful like that." "I work out on the water mostly," Tommy said. "Don't get to the market much except to drop off my catch. But I heard the stories. Frank did close up shop for a while after your girls disappeared. But when he came back and took your old spot, business turned around for him." "His hard work finally paid off," Moren said, though something nagged at her. "Maybe I should visit the market, talk to him. It's been so long since I've seen any of the old crowd." "You should," Tommy encouraged. "Might do good to reconnect." Moren opened her purse and pulled out her wallet. "Now let me give you something for your trouble today. A reward for finding." "Absolutely not," Tommy said firmly, holding up both hands. "I didn't pull that wagon up looking for a reward." "Please," Moren insisted. "This is nothing compared to what you've done for me. You've given me hope for the first time in 15 years. But Tommy was already standing, shaking his head. "Moren, I got grandkids. If it was them, I'd want someone to do the same. You keep your money." Seeing she wouldn't win the argument, Moren tucked the money away, but pulled out a small notepad instead. "At least, let me give you my information. If you ever need anything at all, you call me." She wrote down her home phone number and address, tore off the page, and handed it to him. Tommy accepted the paper, folded it carefully, and placed it in his shirt pocket. "I appreciate that. I should let you get back to your cleaning," Moren said, standing. Tommy walked her back to her car. "You take care now," he said as she got in. "And Moren, I hope they find answers for you. 15 years is too long to wonder." As she drove away, Moren glanced in her rearview mirror to see Tommy still standing there, the paper with her information in his hand. She'd lived in Rockport her entire life, but in her grief, she had forgotten about the simple kindness of people like Tommy Caldwell. It was a small comfort, but on a day when her worst fears were beginning to take shape, she would take whatever comfort she could find. The Rockport fish market sat just 3 blocks from the harbor, its distinctive smell of salt and fresh catch reaching Moren before she even rounded the corner. For 15 years, she'd driven the extra 20 minutes to a grocery store in Gloucester rather than face this place. The fish there was never as fresh, but it didn't come with pitying looks or whispered conversations. Now, standing at the market's entrance, she forced herself to step inside. The layout hadn't changed much. The same concrete floors sloped toward drains, the same ice-filled display cases, the same hand-painted signs advertising the day's catch. But the faces were different. Her old corner spot was indeed Frank's stall now, a professional-looking sign replacing her hand-painted one. The display was well organized, with gleaming fish arranged on fresh ice, but Frank himself was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a young man in his 20s stood behind the counter wrapping up an order. Moren waited until he was free, then approached. "Excuse me. I'm looking for Frank DeWitt." The young man glanced up. "Mr. DeWitt's at the auction house. He should be finishing up about now, if you want to catch him there." "The auction house?" "Yeah, just 3 blocks down, the big gray building." "Can't miss it." Moren thanked him and left, her footsteps quick on the familiar streets. The auction house was impossible to miss, a large weathered building that had been serving Rockport's fishing fleet since the 1920s. As she approached, she noticed how quiet it was. The morning auction would be long over, most of the fishermen already heading back out to sea or home to rest. She was about to enter through the main doors when she heard raised voices from the side of the building. Instinctively, she stopped, pressing herself against the wall. "Told you I'd have your cash by the end of the week." It was Frank's voice, rougher than she remembered, but unmistakable. "Before late, Frank. That was the deal." The other voice belonged to a man in a stained apron, possibly from one of the processing facilities. Frank snapped. "This is Fisherman business. No time for doubt." We agreed. The man in the apron shook his head and began to walk away. Frank followed, his heavy boots thudding on the asphalt. They stopped next to a beat-up pickup truck. The apron man reached through the open window and grabbed something. He dangled a key in the air, the afternoon sun glinting off the metal. Frank snatched it, his movement sharp and angry. "You'll get your money," he said, his tone nasty. The man said nothing, just climbed into his truck. Frank shoved the key into his pocket and turned away without another word, heading back toward the market. Moren waited until she heard the truck's engine roar to life, watching it disappear down the road. She was left alone with her racing thoughts. Frank was probably talking about something related to today's auction. Moren watched Frank's bulky figure stride back toward the fish market, his walk still carrying that characteristic fisherman's role even after all these years. She followed at a distance, giving herself time to compose her thoughts. Whatever that exchange with the apron man had been about, it wasn't her business. Frank had always been a difficult man, prone to sharp words and even sharper moods. When she entered the market again, Frank was already behind his stall, barking orders at his young employee. He glanced up as she approached, his weathered face showing no pleasure at the sight of her. "Well, well," Frank said, his voice raspy from decades of salt air and cigarettes. "After a decade, you finally show your face here again. People started to think you were dead." The words stung, but Moren knew Frank's way. Life had carved deep lines into his face, turning his mouth into a permanent scowl. The fishing life was hard on everyone, but it had been particularly unkind to Frank. "Hello, Frank," she said evenly. "I heard you took over my old spot." "Someone had to," he said, turning to arrange some red snapper on ice, not meeting her eyes. "Now, what are you doing here?" "Actually, I'm here because of what happened this morning," Moren explained. "The police found evidence. A fisherman pulled my daughter's wagon from the sea. That's why I'm back. Just looking around to see how this part of town has changed." Frank's hand stilled on the fish. "I heard," he said, looking up, his dark eyes unreadable. "Who is this fisherman who found it?" "Tommy Caldwell." Frank snorted. "Tommy Caldwell. Lucky him for being famous now. Hope he doesn't use his newfound fame to open a stall around here." His mouth twisted into what might have been a smile, but looked more like a grimace. "Market's crowded enough as it is." "I'm happy your stand is doing so well," Moren offered, trying to soften the conversation. "You deserve success after all your hard work." Frank's expression remained cold. "Your stall used to be doing very well. Sadly, you left this spot right here. It's just lucky." He turned away, reaching under his counter. He grabbed a white styrofoam box and set it on the counter with a thump. Inside, Moren could see fresh fish, pink shrimp, and glistening squid, all nestled in ice. "Frank, no," she protested. "There's no need." "Take it," he cut in gruffly. "I still remember when you cleared out my entire stock back then. Figured I was just some miserable old man. But now we're even. Take it or leave it, but I don't owe anyone a damn thing. That's just the way the world works." Moren was momentarily speechless, unsure whether Frank was offering her a gesture of kindness or simply trying to show off. Still, she chose to give him the benefit of the doubt, trying to see the good in him. She accepted the offer, lifting the surprisingly heavy container. "Thank you, Frank," she said quietly. He waved her off, already turning back to his display. Moren drove home with the styrofoam box on the passenger seat. The gift was both touching and unsettling. At her house, she carried it to the back kitchen, a space she'd once used daily when she ran her fish stall. Now it stood neglected, dust motes dancing in the afternoon light streaming through grimy windows. She opened the old chest freezer, already knowing what she'd find. The motor was silent, the interior warm and musty. 15 years of disuse had killed it. Her refrigerator's small freezer compartment couldn't possibly hold all of Frank's gift. Sighing, Moren transferred the box back to her car. She'd have to take it to the cutting house at the harbor, pay them to clean and store it. As she backed out of her driveway, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more about Frank. The harbor parking lot was busy with the afternoon shift change, fishermen heading out for evening runs while others secured their boats for the night. Moren had just pulled into a space near the cutting house when she spotted a familiar figure in the distance. Tommy Caldwell was walking quickly across the lot, but something was wrong. His shoulders were hunched, his walk agitated, and he carried a black garbage bag at arm's length. She jogged toward him, calling his name. As she got closer, an absolutely foul smell hit her, rotting fish mixed with something worse. "Tommy, what's wrong?" He turned, his face flushed with anger. "Someone threw this inside my boathouse just now. I was inside organizing my nets when I heard something hit the wall. By the time I got out there, I found this bag of God knows what." "Did you see who did it?" Tommy's jaw tightened. "Caught a glimpse of someone walking away. Bald head. That's about all I could make out. When I tried to chase after him, he'd already disappeared. Must have had his car running." "What kind of car?" Moren found herself asking, though she wasn't sure why it mattered. "Ford F-150, late 90s model, dark blue or black. Half the fishermen around here drive something similar." Tommy shifted the reeking bag to his other hand. "But if my one good eye was right, I saw what looked like a sticker just near the license plate." "Sticker? What sticker?" "Can't say exactly what it was. Didn't get a proper look, but if I see it again, I'll know." His voice hardened. "And next time I'll deal with that person for doing this to me." Tommy seemed to shake himself from his anger, noticing the styrofoam box in Moren's hands. "What brings you to the cutting house?" "Frank gave me a box of fresh seafood," she explained. "My freezer's broken at home. Has been for years. My fridge alone isn't enough for all this, so I'm having it cleaned and stored here for the week." She lifted the lid slightly. "You should take some. There's no way I can finish this alone. And She paused, the reality hitting her again. "I have no one to share it with." Tommy's expression softened. "That's kind of you, Moren. Tell you what, let me get rid of this foul thing first, then I'll come find you." "You said Frank did that? How strange." They parted ways, Tommy heading for the dumpsters while Moren entered the cutting house. The familiar smell of fresh fish and the sound of saws on ice brought back memories she'd tried to bury. Behind the counter stood Mark Patterson, his hair grayer than she remembered, but his smile just as warm. "Moren Mercer," Mark said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "How long has it been?" "Too long," she admitted. "I haven't been around the harbor area much." She added quietly, "It's the grief. It was easier to stay away." Mark nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I heard about this morning. Police found the girl's toy. Their wagon." "Yes, that's actually why I'm here today. Just looking around the harbor." She set the box on the counter. "Frank Dick gave me all this, but I need it cleaned and stored." "How much for a week's storage?" "No charge," Mark said immediately. "It's the least I can." "Mark, please." Moren pulled out her wallet. "I've had enough of people giving me free things today. I appreciate the kindness, but I need to pay. I need things to be normal." Mark studied her for a moment, then named a fair price. As Moren counted out the bills, she heard the kitchen door swing open. A man emerged to collect the styrofoam box, and Moren's breath caught. It was the same man from the auction house, the one in the apron who'd given Frank the key. She tried to keep her voice casual as she turned back to Mark. "Excuse me, who is that?" "The man who just took my box." Mark looked confused by the question. "That's Jesse Vaughn. Is there anything wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong," Moren forced a smile. "I just thought I recognized him. Saw him this morning talking to Frank at the auction house." Mark's expression shifted slightly. "Jesse rarely does business with Frank. To be honest, I don't really like the guy. Frank, I mean, nothing personal, but he's just not a pleasant man to talk to." He started to turn toward the kitchen. "I should go talk to Jesse." "No, please," Moren said quickly. "It wasn't anything important." "Really?" Mark paused, then shrugged. "All right then. Thanks for letting me know, though. I'll have your fish ready whenever you need it." Moren thanked him and left the cutting house. Outside, she walked to her car with measured steps, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The day had been an emotional marathon. From the wagon's discovery to seeing old faces, from Tommy's kindness to Frank's unexpected gift. All she wanted now was to go home, make a cup of tea, and process everything that had happened. She started her Honda and pulled out of the parking lot, taking the familiar route home. As she passed the fish market, she couldn't help but glance over. Frank's stall was bustling with late afternoon customers, his young employee working the counter with practiced efficiency. But Frank himself was nowhere to be seen. Moren continued down Harbor Road, reaching over to turn on the radio. The local oldies station was playing Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, and she let the familiar melody wash over her. For just a moment, she could pretend it was a normal day, that she was just another Rockport resident heading home after errands. The illusion shattered when she noticed a car speeding up behind her in the rearview mirror. It swerved around her Honda with reckless abandon, then suddenly pulled over on the shoulder ahead. The driver's door flew open, and a man stepped out, shouting and waving his arms frantically. Moren's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She couldn't make out the man's face clearly. She was too focused on not rear-ending him. But as she checked her mirrors to pull over safely, she recognized him. Jesse Vaughn, the butcher from the cutting house. She reversed carefully until she was parallel with his car, then stepped out. Jesse was already jogging toward her, his face flushed and panicked. "I need to speak with you about something important," Jesse said. "We're in the middle of the road," Moren said, glancing nervously at the passing traffic. "Come to my place and we'll talk." "No," Jesse's voice cracked. "I need to tell you something important now. Right now." The raw fear in his voice made Moren's stomach clench. "What is it?" "Frank came to see me this morning." Jesse was trembling visibly, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Actually, he's been seeking me out for the last few weeks, but this morning he looked different, more serious, like he was panicking." "Get to the point," Moren urged, her heart beginning to race. Jesse took a shaky breath. "Frank's been asking to use my fishery house for the past 2 weeks, to rent it. He said he was going to receive a big stock and needed extra space to store it. But the thing is, he wanted to rent the entire space and have the key. I refused. I told him he could store his stuff, but I couldn't give him the key or rent him ownership of the fishery house. But this morning," Jesse continued, his voice dropping, "he was different. He looked more serious, desperate even. He insisted on renting my boat for 3 days. He wanted the key to my boathouse too." "Your boat?" Moren's mind raced back to the wagon found at sea. "When I refused him again, he made me an offer. He paid me, God, so much money, and told me he would use my boathouse and the boat to tie up loose ends. Said he needed to get rid of something." Jesse's face had gone pale. "So I insisted he tell me what he was getting rid of." Jesse's voice broke. "He easily showed me a picture of twins. Told me if I told the police about this, he'd still kill the women and come for me and my boss Mark too. But if I kept silent and let him use my boat, then he'd make sure the police never found what he did and I'd be safe." Moren felt the world tilt. "Twins?" Jesse met her eyes, tears threatening to spill. "I believe the girl was one of your daughters. I saw the old flyers, and they look similar, even though the girl was grown up now. I wasn't sure back then, but the more I think about it, the more sure I am. And Mark just told me you received that seafood box from Frank, and you were the mother of the missing twins, so I thought it must be related somehow. Why are you telling me this now?" Moren's voice had gone deadly quiet. "Why didn't you call the police immediately?" "The money he offered was tempting," Jesse continued miserably. "I could expand my business immediately, help Mark with his debts. I could get rid of the boat after he used it, and keep myself safe. So I accepted it. I was so stupid. I shouldn't have." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't call the police because I was scared. The world seemed to stop. Twins alive after 15 years? Now you've told me," Moren said, her voice sharp with urgency. "You know that you have to tell the police, right? You have to help me. Please show me your boathouse. Where is it? We need to get to the police." Okay, Jesse babbled, apologizing over and over. "I'm so sorry. I was stupid and slow. I should have. Your apology only means something if we make it there in time before he does something very bad to my daughter or the girl, whoever it is." With shaking hands, Moren grabbed the Nokia phone from her purse. The little device that Detective Morrison had given her just this morning now felt like a lifeline. She punched in the number he'd provided, her fingers clumsy with urgency. "This is Moren Mercer," she said when the dispatcher answered. "I need to speak to Detective Morrison immediately. It's about my daughter's case." Within seconds, Morrison was on the line. Moren forced herself to speak clearly, relaying everything Jesse had told her. Beside her, Jesse provided his boathouse address when prompted, his voice thin with fear. "You'll go to the station and wait there while we send a unit to the address," Morrison instructed. "Please," Moren's voice broke. "You can't alert Frank or he'll kill my daughter." "We acknowledge that, Mrs. Mercer. We'll come up with a strategy. No sirens, no marked cars until we know the situation. Get to the station now, both of you." As Moren lowered the phone, she looked at Jesse's terrified face and felt a mixture of rage and desperate hope. "Get in the car," she told Jesse, her voice tight with urgency. "And pray we're not too late." Jesse nodded, pulling his car into a small lot behind a bait shop. He jogged to the Honda and slid into the passenger seat, his hands still trembling. "There's no way I can just sit at home or wait at the police station," Moren said, gripping the steering wheel. "Show me the way to your boathouse. We can watch from a distance. Find a spot where we can see what's happening without being seen." "I know just the place," Jesse said, pointing ahead. There's a viewing spot on the other side of the harbor where we can get a clear view without getting caught. Take a left here. They drove in tense silence, Jesse giving directions until they reached a small hill overlooking the harbor. From there, they had a clear view of Jesse's boathouse across the water. Moren parked behind some scrub bushes, and they both leaned forward, scanning the scene. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. The boathouse stood silent, Jesse's boat still visible inside through the open water entrance. No sign of Frank. No police presence yet. I don't understand, Jesse whispered. Is he not here yet? Or has he already been here? Frank didn't tell you what time? Moren asked, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. No, just that he needed it for 3 days starting today. Moren grabbed her Nokia and called the station. We're at the viewing point. The boathouse looks empty. No sign of Frank or any activity. Detective Morrison's voice was calm but urgent. We're sending multiple teams to search for Frank and to stake out the boathouse. Stay where you are. I met him just a few hours ago, Moren said, thinking out loud. There's no way he could have pulled off his plan that fast. Within minutes, unmarked police cars converged on the boathouse. Officers in plain clothes took positions, some entering the structure while others established a perimeter. The operation was swift and professional. Moren and Jesse returned to their car, keeping their distance from the police activity. The late afternoon sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Then Moren saw it, a dark blue Ford F-150 driving past on the access road below them. The sticker. There it was next to the license plate, just as Tommy had described, a faded Marine Corps decal. She could see the driver's profile through the side window, a bald head catching the dying light. That's him, she breathed. That's Frank's truck, the same one Tommy saw. Without thinking, she started the engine and began following from a distance. Jesse fumbled with his phone, keeping the line open with police dispatch. He's heading north on Harbor Access Road, Jesse reported. Wait, he's turning. Oh God, he's not going to my boathouse. He's heading to my fishery house. Your fishery house? Morrison's voice crackled through the phone. It's new, been open less than a year. It's at the old Brennan fishery site, Jesse explained rapidly. He must have decided to use that instead. Does he have keys to the fishery house? Yes, Jesse's voice was miserable. He took my whole key ring. Listen carefully, Morrison said. Do not approach. We can't stop him on the road. If he has the girl and a weapon, cornering him could trigger violence. We need a tactical advantage. Go back to the station now. No, Moren said firmly. We'll watch from a distance. I need to see this. Morrison started to protest, but Moren had already turned off the main road, following a service path that led to higher ground above the old fishery. She parked behind a stand of pine trees, the car hidden, but with a clear view of the fishery house below. They got out quietly, Moren crouching behind the vegetation. Through the gathering dusk, they watched Frank's truck pull up to the fishery house. He got out, looked around carefully, then went to the passenger side. Moren's heart stopped as she watched him pull out a limp female form. Even from this distance, even after 15 years, a mother knows. The way the woman's hair fell, the shape of her face and profile, it was one of her girls, grown up but unmistakable. Frank carried her inside after fumbling with the keys. Moments later, he emerged again, retrieving a coil of rope and a toolbox from his truck bed. Oh God, Jesse whispered. He's going to, Moren hissed. Only one of the twins is there. Where's the other? In the distance, she could see police vehicles approaching with their lights off, moving like shadows in the failing light. They positioned themselves strategically, surrounding the building. She counted at least 6 officers moving into position. The raid, when it came, was swift and precise. Officers breached multiple entrances simultaneously. There was shouting, Frank's voice, angry and surprised, but no gunshots. Minutes later, they led him out in handcuffs, his bald head bowed, shoulders slumped in defeat. Moren's phone rang. It was Morrison. We got him. He's secured. But Mrs. Mercer, we need you and Jesse here now. Your daughter is scared and asking for you. Moren was already running back to the car, Jesse close behind. They drove down to the fishery house, abandoning all pretense of hiding. Police waved them through the perimeter. Inside, the fishery house was eerily quiet after the chaos. Industrial refrigeration units hummed in the background. Police photographers were documenting everything. Frank's tools were laid out on a stainless steel table. His guns and personal items were on a concrete slab in the center of the room. A young woman lay there. Above her, A rope hung from a ceiling beam, partially knotted. Frank had been in the middle of his preparations when police stormed in. Moren approached slowly, her legs trembling. The woman, barely more than a girl despite being 23, was stirring as an officer gently shook her shoulder. "Miss, can you hear me? You're safe now." The girl's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. She looked at the officers, at the fishery house, and finally at Moren. No recognition in those familiar eyes. "Who are you?" the girl asked weakly. "Why are the police here? Where's Frank?" Moren knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. "This is Mom. I'm your mom. The police caught Frank. This man, Jesse, he helped us find you." The girl shook her head, fresh tears spilling. "My mother's dead. Frank said she died." "No, sweetheart, I'm alive. I've been looking for you every single day for 15 years. The girl studied Moren's face, confusion giving way to something else. "He lied to us," she whispered. "Frank lied about everything, and he killed her. Frank killed Daisy." The name hit Moren like a physical blow. This was Laya, her younger twin, by 12 minutes. And Daisy. "Oh, Laya," Moren sobbed, gathering her daughter into her arms. "You are my mom?" Laya asked, wonder in her voice. "You look so old. I barely recognize you." Moren laughed through her tears. "That must be from all the years looking for you and thinking about you and Daisy." "Daisy's been gone for a long time," Laya said, her voice breaking. She tried to say more, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. "It's okay," Moren soothed. "No need to rush. What's important is we're together now and alive." "And Frank's been arrested," Laya added. Laya turned to Jesse, who stood awkwardly nearby. "You helped find me?" Jesse nodded, tears in his own eyes. "We all saved each other. If I hadn't spoken up, I'd be in trouble for having that," he gestured at the rope setup, "on my property. I never could have lived with the guilt and regret if I'd stayed quiet." Suddenly, Jesse wrinkled his nose. "Do you smell that?" He walked toward the back of the fishery house with an officer. "The incinerator. It's on." They found it glowing red-hot in a back room. The officer examined it grimly. He was preparing to dispose of evidence, or... "He asked me for the boat first," Jesse said quietly. "I thought he planned to dump her at sea, but maybe with all the police activity at the harbor today, the divers searching, he changed his plan." Laya clung to Moren, sobbing. The medical team arrived then, gently extracting them from their embrace to examine Laya. "He gave me cough medicine," Laya told them. "Much more than my usual dose. He forced me to take it. He wanted you sedated for transport, but conscious for..." The officer trailed off. "You're safe now." The medical team was thorough but gentle, checking for injuries both new and old. They documented everything Laya told them about the abuse she had suffered, their faces professionally neutral but kind. "She should have a full examination at the hospital," the lead paramedic said. "But she's not in immediate medical danger." Detective Morrison approached. "If you're both able, I'd like to take your statements at the station while everything's still fresh. Then we'll get Laya to the hospital." They helped Laya to the police car, Moren never letting go of her hand. Jesse followed in another vehicle, his part in the story not yet over. As they drove away from the fishery house, Moren held her daughter close. 15 years of separation had finally ended, even as the horrible truth of what had happened began to emerge. The Rockport police station hummed with activity as they arrived. Officers moved with purpose through the corridors. Phones rang constantly, and hushed conversations filled the air. Moren caught fragments as they passed, an officer handing a file to Detective Morrison saying, "Frank's talking, but he might still be hiding some things." She exchanged a worried glance with Jesse, who looked pale and frightened as officers led him toward a separate interview room. Laya was taken to another room with a female officer, leaving Moren to follow Detective Morrison into a small, windowless space with a metal table and 2 chairs. "Let's start from the beginning," Morrison said gently, pulling out a digital recorder. "Tell me everything that happened today." Moren recounted it all, finding the wagon, visiting Tommy, Frank's gift, the cutting house, Jesse's frantic confession on the roadside, the race to save her daughter. Morrison took notes, occasionally asking for clarification, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. When she finished, he opened the file. He read through it silently, his jaw tightening, then looked up at her. "Frank's confessing," he said quietly. "I need to share this with you, but it's going to be difficult to hear." Moren steeled herself. "I need to know." Morrison began reading from Frank's statement. "On August 12, 1985, your daughters Laya and Daisy Mercer were playing in the local park with their red radio flyer wagon." "Yes," Moren confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. The park was so close, just across the road and around the corner. I always let them play there unsupervised. It was such a safe, close-knit community. Everyone knew everyone. Frank says he approached them with a promise of vanilla slices from the cafe near the harbor. Told them they were going fishing together, that he had your permission, said they'd catch fish for dinner and make you proud. Moren's hands clenched in her lap as Morrison continued. Instead of the cafe, he drove them to his house. He sedated both girls and wrapped them in a tarpaulin with his fishing gear. He hid them in the locked cabin of his trawler and began moving them from place to place. He had a network, other fishermen at different harbors along the coast. He would lend the girls to these men for days at a time in exchange for their silence. This went on while the investigation was hot. Moren felt bile rise in her throat. All those people, they all knew. After the investigation cooled, he moved them to his basement. He gave them small amounts of money daily. Told them if they were good and quiet, they could save enough to leave someday. He convinced them you and your husband had moved to another state and died in a plane crash, with bodies never recovered. Did they never try to escape? Moren asked, though she dreaded the answer. Morrison's face was grim as he consulted the notes. Daisy did, when she was 14. He paused, clearly struggling with the next part. Frank caught her trying to leave. During an assault, he cut her throat. Then Morrison's voice faltered. Tell me, Moren said, though tears were already flowing. He dismembered her body and processed it. Processed it? What? What do you mean? He said, and I'm quoting, he diluted it with the acid he used in processing fish and seafood remains, then mixed it with the rest before disposing of it. The room spun. Moren gripped the table, sobbing uncontrollably. Her baby girl, her Daisy, not just murdered, but the thought was too horrible to complete. Morrison gave her time, pushing a box of tissues across the table. When she could speak again, Moren asked the question that had haunted her for 15 years. Why? Why did he do this to us? Morrison flipped to another page. Jealousy. Your seafood stall had become the most popular in the market. You were getting contracts to supply restaurants in bigger cities. Frank's family fishing business, which had operated for 3 generations, lost several major contracts because of your success. He blamed you for his financial ruin and social isolation. But that's just business, Moren protested weakly. Frank saw it differently. He had no family of his own, no children, no partner. Watching your thriving family while his life crumbled, he wanted to, in his words, even the score, take from you what you cherished most since you'd taken everything from him. A terrible realization dawned on Moren. The gift, the box filled with seafood he gave me. It was his way of flaunting his victory. Frank's stall was failing before my girls disappeared. Then sometime later, after the case went cold, he reopened in my old spot, the spot he always wanted. It became successful, just like mine had been. His plan worked, Morrison said bitterly. He destroyed your family and took your business, but he lost his soul in the process. Now he'll spend what's left of his miserable life in prison. Moren suddenly remembered. Tommy Caldwell, the fisherman who found the wagon. Someone threw rotten fish in his boathouse today. It was Frank, wasn't it? He had a bald head, drove a blue pickup with a Marine Corps sticker. Frank must have been jealous of Tommy's sudden fame. He even asked me specifically for Tommy's name. Morrison made a note. We'll inform Mr. Caldwell immediately. Thank God we got Frank when we did. Who knows what he might have done next? What about Jesse? Moren asked. He was terrified, but he came forward. He saved Laya's life. There will be charges for his involvement, Morrison admitted. But the prosecutor will consider his cooperation and how his confession led directly to saving your daughter. The judge will likely be lenient. He closed the file. I think that's enough for now. I'll arrange an escort to take you and Laya to the hospital for her examination. We'll update you on Jesse's situation and any additional evidence we collect. Moren stood on shaky legs, and Morrison opened the door. In the corridor, she saw Jesse flanked by officers. Despite his obvious fear, he managed a weak smile. No matter what happens to me, it's going to be all right, he said. I can live with the consequences. I couldn't have lived with staying silent. Then Moren saw her. Laya emerging from another interview room. She looked better, more alert after talking with the officers. Their eyes met across the corridor, and suddenly they were moving toward each other. They collided in an embrace that erased 15 years in an instant. Laya might be 23 now, a grown woman who had endured unimaginable horrors, but in her mother's arms, she was 8 again. They held each other, as if letting go might mean losing each other once more. My baby, Moren whispered into Laya's hair. My sweet girl. Mom, Laya sobbed. I thought I'd never see you again. He told us so many lies. Around them, the police station continued its busy work. But for Moren and Laya, the world had shrunk to just the two of them, a mother and daughter, separated by evil but reunited by the courage of an ordinary man who chose to speak up despite his fear. The police escort arrived, ready to take them to the hospital. As they prepared to leave, Moren looked back at Jessie one more time, nodding her gratitude. Then she turned to her daughter, taking her hand. In a world where darkness could steal children from a sunny park, where evil could hide behind a fisherman's gruff exterior, where 15 years could pass in questions and grief, there was still light. It lived in people like Tommy Caldwell, who remembered old missing person flyers. In Jesse Vaughn, who found the courage to speak despite his terror. In Detective Morrison, who never gave up on two missing girls. Most of all, it lived in the love between a mother and daughter. A love that endured 15 years of separation, lies, and loss. Frank had taken so much from them. He'd murdered Daisy, stolen Laya's childhood, and shattered Moren's life, but he hadn't destroyed that love. As they walked out of the police station into the evening air, Moren held her daughter's hand tightly. They had a long road ahead, healing, justice, learning to be mother and daughter again. But they would walk it together. The story of the Mercer family was one of unimaginable loss and miraculous reunion. It was a reminder that evil could lurk in the most ordinary places, wearing the most familiar faces. But it was also proof that truth, however long buried, had a way of surfacing, sometimes from the depths, pulled up in a fisherman's net on an ordinary morning that became anything but ordinary.